I have been doing a uh, summary, or I should say a survey of some of the Psalms in Hebrew that bring comfort to me. And I'd like to share that. One of them is Psalm 2. And I'm sharing the Psalm by reading it in Hebrew, translating it into English, and then going to New Testament application. And so this Psalm, Psalm 2, is about a plot against a king that was being coronated. Many times this has been applied to the time in 2 Samuel 5, verse 7, when the Philistines heard that David was being coronated over Israel. They went up against David. That's what many believe to be the background. Uh, as a minister, a Christian minister, I believe it also has a double fulfillment, that it points to the final David, the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And since this is the week of the Lord's, can we say, first, his Passion Week, I'd like to read these texts in Hebrew in relationship to that. We begin with the nations raging. Lama rakshu goyim u'umim yeguri. Yatzavu malchei eretz verozanim nosadu yachad. Al Adonai ve'al Mashicho. Ninetka et mosrotemu. V'nashlicha mimenu avotemu. Why are the nations in an uproar? And why do the people plot or mutter in vain? Same word used in Psalm 1, muttering the Torah, Yegeh. Here we have Yegu. The kings of the earth station themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. In terms of New Testament application, Acts chapter 3 applies that to Jesus Christ. I should say Acts chapter 4. It talks about that very text. It's quoting the text in verses 25 and 26. Why do the nations rage and the peoples meditate a vain thing? The kings of the earth station themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his Christ. And then it interprets it. For of a truth they were gathered together in that city against your holy child Jesus, whom you have anointed, Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, to do whatsoever your hand and your will has predetermined to occur. So the first application is the cross, Christ upon the cross, and the nations saying, we will not have this one to rule over us. Then we have God in heaven, who sees what's going on, but is determined that his king is going to reign from Mount Zion. This is verses 5 or 4 to 6. Then we hear the word of the king in verse 7 and following. Asapra el chok, Adonai amar elai b'ni ata, ani hayom yeliticha. That is, the Lord said to me, my son, you are. I today have given birth to you. Sha'al mimeni v'tnagoyim nachalatecha, v'chuzatecha afse aretz. Teruim b'shevet barzel kikli yotzer tenapatzem. Ask of me, and I'll give you the nations for your inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for your possession. You will crush them with an iron scepter, As vessels of a potter, you will dash them to pieces. The king speaks about God's determination that he would reign. It's interesting, in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul applied this to the resurrection of Christ in a sermon in Acts chapter 2. It talks about how God fulfilled the promise to the fathers by raising Jesus. As in the second Psalm, it has been written, "You are my son. I today have begotten you." He then quotes a passage in Isaiah that he's fulfilling the sure mercies of David. And then finally, Psalm 16, "You will not give your Holy One to see corruption." The text goes on to apply this to Christ. For David is not the one now fulfilling this. For David, when basically he died, he fell asleep and was placed with his fathers. But this one God raised, and he did not see corruption. So Paul, in this sermon, applies this recorded by Luke to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then finally, we see the fulfillment of this in the second advent of Christ. In Revelation chapter 15, you will crush the nations with an iron scepter. As vessels of a potter, you will dash them to pieces. Actually, the Hebrew teruim could have been read tir'im, meaning you will shepherd the nations with an iron scepter. That is the way it was translated in the Septuagint. Poimanes, you shall shepherd the nations, or poimanes. It's interesting, in Revelation chapter 19, John then, quoting or referring to the Septuagint, looks at the return of Christ, that he will he will judge the nations, smite the nation, and he will shepherd them with an iron scepter. So again, we see Christ coming back as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords in Revelation to bring judgment when he returns. This text is a comfort to me because in the New Testament reading, it looks at the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Today, you are my son, I have given birth to you. And it's interesting, Jesus conquers death, and he certainly is the final king in terms of the New Testament teaching. And as I think about Easter, as I think about what is coming in a few days, I take comfort in the fact that Jesus Christ is the resurrected King of Kings and Lord of Lords.